Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode 87 of A Fern Between Us.
That caught you by surprise, didn't it?
It did. I was adjusting.
We are two of the four owners of Vivac Winery. My name's Jesse.
And I'm Michelle, and we are talking about blends, wine blends today. And it was kind of a big day. I had to get up at 6 a.m, and for me, it feels monumental, and I'm so tired. So we're gonna kind of skip over the check-in, unless there's something like you want to share.
No.
Okay.
My back hurts a little bit, but I'm doing pretty good.
Well, you're working your ass off like every day, long hours, lots of toil.
What are you gonna do?
Well, so let's start talking about. We have two wines today that we are tasting. We are tasting the Vivac Diavolo and then a Chateauneuf du Pape, which is from Côte d'Aron, France, and is one of the more famous of blends.
Yeah.
Let's start with the Diavolo, and I know you don't have that in your glass, right?
I've got this still. We were pre-gaming a little bit.
Well, we had to make sure they were corked.
What do you want to say about them?
Okay,
Or
so
about-
the Diavolo is on this vintage is 40% Tempranillo, 40% Aglianico, and 20% Cabernet. So it's a shift from what it used to. You used to try to keep it.
Often we
more,
tried to be more of a Bordeaux blend.
Yeah. And so what, if you can kind of remember back, was it that made you go with, Aglianico and Tempranillo as the bulk?
That's a good question. Maybe, I don't remember exactly. 2018, is that where we're at?
I think so.
God, I don't remember, honestly. But I'm sure we were short on Cab and Merlot.
Oh, I almost dropped it.
Yeah,
2018.
And that kind of, it's we're trying to have a certain number of gallons of wine that we're going to go through of, like, say, Cabernet or some of the more popular ones, Tempranillo, things like that. If we are short, like this year, we're going to be short on...
You are a little on the short side.
I'll be there shortly. If we're lacking Sangiovese or Cabernet or something like that, it all of a sudden a major blender ends up being like, do I save it for the Cabernet or do I, let some of it be over here at Diavolo? Like, people buy Diavolo a lot, of course, but Cabernet is a big seller, and
for sure,
if we're to run out or have to release a Cabernet
too
after
early.
12 months or something, like, I don't want to do that as often, so that comes into play a lot. I bet that's sort of what happened here.
Okay.
Is that we're like, well, not so much Cabernet or not so much Merlot. Maybe we had no Merlot that year. There was a year that we had no Merlot. Not because of weather and stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're looking for other bigger grapes and that go well together, and so we're trying to make the best blend that we can out of the availability. And so that's what we end up with in something like the Divino or Diavolo. That we kind of consider them like something that we do on the side for fun and less important in some ways, even though it's the very first blend we make is the Diavolo. So it's the most important. It's the wine we spend the most get the most attention, and then everything else falls out from there. But we do know a couple parameters before we start.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. One of the things that I'm really loving is the integration of the oak. I think that is such an important component. So it's kind of interesting. I almost would call this a movie popcorn kind of smell. There's this toasty component that's real clean, and then a buttery kind of thing that is really interesting, and it's got lots of really incredible fruit. It's got lots of earthy nuances.
I think the oak, the mellowness of the oak has to do a lot with just the age. Aging it this long
2018.
does that. All the fruit things are kind of like more kind of condensed down, kind of prunier ish, and leaves room for some of the other stuff to be a little more integrated. And to me, there's a lot of like coffee and like
Caramel.
iron. I don't know. there's some I don't know.
Kind of slate.
Slate, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, minerally.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know.
And then lots of like you were saying, raisined kind of fruit that's really, really pretty. I'm really liking this wine. This
Nice.
is one that I've been pushing in our private stash because it's so finesse driven.
Yeah.
And it's a bigger, bolder wine, but with so much to offer still. It's still going to be great paired with food. It still has great acidity, structure, and yet it's got this sexy kind of
I want to see it age.
awesomeness.
That's part of the beauty of blends. Where are you going with this blends concept? Are we gonna?
Okay.
Because I have lots to say about blends, but I don't know if you have questions about that.
We do have a few questions.
Should I wait until after before talking about blends in general, or?
Well, one of the questions is, why would a winemaker choose to blend or not?
Okay.
Do we want to real quick just do tasting notes on the Chateauneuf?
Okay, let's do that real quick.
Okay, so
Chateauneuf du Pape. We honeymooned in the south of Avignon, which is just south of Chateauneuf, and Tavel. So like we fell in love with Chateauneuf du Pape, and we fell in love with rosé wines at that point. And both of those things have have been part of our experience as a winery and winemakers ever since. Chateauneuf, both of them actually use the same grapes. One's just the rosé version and one's the red version, and there's a whole glacial moraine. They're planted not in soil but in rocks.
Oh, it's
which
wild.
is really wild.
All of our honeymoon pictures were of vineyards and rocks, and we got home and there was like none of us.
Massive piles of rocks, and they're like full on mountains full of rocks and just no like soil in there at all. But so they get a lot of minerality and a lot of like kind of cool stuff from that. But they grow 13 grapes there. Were you gonna say the same thing?
I was gonna say
this is just off the top of my head, but
it is a specific region that falls under certain rules, which in Europe and various other old world countries really focus on the rules around certain areas to make those wines. And so they had 13 legal varietals. Recently, they've upped that to 18.
Oh, have they introduced another few?
Yeah,
Okay.
But traditionally, you were also supposed to use all 13.
Right.
Which is part of why this is such a famous blend.
They may
That's
say
really hard.
Exactly. I didn't look up. I didn't know what we were serving today, but they probably say there has to be at least this much, but no more than this much of Syrah or whatever it is. They don't say that at all?
They don't.
Okay. In other regions, they do.
Yes.
But so they let them do whatever they want. Some of them are white grapes. Some of them are red grapes.
Yeah.
And they all go into a bottle of red Chateauneuf du Pape.
This is one of the newer kind of versions of Chateauneuf. So it has predominantly, I told you I was tired, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvèdre, and Cinsault. And so that's actually not very complex of a blend.
Is that all that's
Chateauneuf.
in this?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Well, it doesn't taste a lot like a Chateauneuf to me.
It's kind of wild. Yeah, I wasn't sure what I was getting into.
Yeah.
I thought we'd try, a fun new producer. It's much more flashy fruit.
flashy fruit. I like
Yeah,
that.
you know, bright. It's only 2020. So, you know, usually on a Chateauneuf, you want to invest $100 and get an older one and have it really maturing. And it usually has lots of earthiness and depth. And this is a little brighter, lighter. It was also only $36. So
There you go.
yeah.
It tastes a little young and slightly contrived in a weird way, and it doesn't have
That wow.
the Chateauneuf wow that I'm used to or whatever. But
It's still delicious.
I don't taste Chateauneufs all the time.
Yeah.
We used to drink a lot more of them. I don't know what why we haven't, but we just
Well,
don't as
because
much.
your dad was buying them.
Oh, interesting. Anyway, yeah. So I don't know, but Marsan, Rasan, I don't know. There's a few other ones that are the traditional ones, but
yeah,
it's okay.
The four that I mentioned that are in that are some of the biggest plantings throughout Chateauneuf. But what did you want to say about why would a winemaker choose to blend or not?
Okay, so every grape has its
Day in the sun?
its day in the sun. Every grape definitely has its day in the sun. Hopefully not too much sun, but often too much sun. They have their strengths and their weaknesses. So basically, you're blending to the strengths, and you're hopefully like highlighting the strengths, and wherever its weaknesses are the holes, you want to use a corresponding grape to fill those gaps, basically, or several grapes or whatever. And it can be like traditionally for color or for fruitiness or for tannin or for, you know, there's lots of different aspects that you're like, it's just not quite a full wine in all its glory just yet. Let me use a little bit of this or a little bit of that. And the old world, they, you know, in very specific regions, they figured out over hundreds and hundreds of years and lots of wineries, they figured out, these 3 grapes go with those 2 grapes, and if it goes in just a certain kind of way, that makes the best thing. And we all decided, and then they wrote it into law, which we talk about Big Brother over here, but in Europe, like, it's for real, like what they are or aren't allowed to do to call something a Chateauneuf de Pape, for instance.
Yeah.
France is the most stringent. Germany's right there with them, and then it's less and less strict as you go out from there. Italy, Spain, other places, but
still pretty.
But still kind of on that same model. And in the U.S., we're allowed to grow anything, anywhere, and if you can turn it into alcohol, you can call it the wine. You know, you can call it Merlot if you want to, but that's awesome, but it's also maybe maybe ill-advised in some circumstances, right?
Right. It has to be 75% of that grape in order to call it Merlot.
Exactly.
But,
if I want to call it Merlot, it has to be 75%. So all of our wines are some amount of a blend, almost always. Occasionally, we had the Rosé of Cabernet a couple years ago that was 100%.
Your Chardonnay is 2 different vineyards, but still
100% Chardonnay.
Chardonnay, which is an interesting side note, right?
Right.
So there's also blending of the same grape that comes from different areas, or like in Montalcino.
Can easily call it Chardonnay, but I can't call it this vineyard's Chardonnay
because it's got 2 different vineyards. Yes.
Exactly.
Well, and so Brunello or Rosso di Montalcino. Phenomenal, big, bold wines. They are Sangiovese. They're 100% Sangiovese.
Yep.
But they're
Different
usually
clones.
6 different clones.
Right.
Which is super interesting.
Or at least 3 are really like the staple 3, and then maybe some others as well.
Yeah. It's really fascinating when you start getting into the different clones and then blending those together.
Yeah.
Do you call that a blend? Maybe. But generally, you'd call that Sangiovese. How fascinating, right?
And in Europe, you would just call it from this place, Montalcino. Boom. There we go. We made a Brunello de Montalcino. They don't say the word Sangiovese Sangiovese anywhere in there.
No.
But that is exactly.
You just gotta know.
You gotta, yeah. If you're interested into that wine, research it, figure out what it is. They say, oh, we don't care about varietals over here. We care about the place. Bullshit. They care about it way more than we do. They really
That's fighting words.
They really do care about it. Just the average public doesn't know what grape it is.
Right.
Because
American public.
Right. No, even over there, like if you found somebody, I mean, maybe in Maltocino itself, but like 20 miles away, somebody loves Brunello, they might not know that it's 100% Sangiovese. They don't.
That's true.
They just know it as the wine from that town is the best in our area, or whatever,
right.
The one that I like, or the one that my cousin likes, or whatever it is. They may not know that, Bordeaux. They don't know if it's, they like the Bordeaux from here. They don't like the Bordeaux from there. Oh, it's because you have a palate for Merlot instead of Cabernet, or a palate for Cabernet instead of Merlot, or whatever it is.
Right.
Because it's Cabernet heavy or Merlot heavy. But they don't know that. The winemakers have to worry about that, and they just say place names.
Yeah.
But the laws say different. The laws tell you exactly what you're allowed to add and not add.
And an interesting component to that, speaking of one of our favorite wines, Brunello's, and the Sangiovese grape, is being at a big competition like Berlin, and there's just a component. We're tasting them blind. We do get to know the year, the vintage, and the grape, but not where it's from or the producer or anything like that. So Sangiovese is a very big category because there's all the entries from Italy, but then there's all these amazing Sangioveses being made from all over the world. We make a fantastic Sangiovese, but it's very, very tricky to pick the medal winners when it can range so greatly. Chianti is Sangiovese as well, usually blended with a little Trebbiano. Which is interesting.
Here's a question. Do they throw in the Super Tuscans and stuff like that into that category? Because often
that would be a blend.
It's a blend, but often it's, because IGT.
Yeah, they follow some of those rules where if it were predominantly Sangiovese, yes, it would be in the same category.
So if it was 75% Sangiovese, they could enter it as a Sangiovese, even though they call it whatever they call it.
Yeah, and I think the percentage is a little bit different over there. I think maybe is it 80 in. I would have to look that up.
It probably depends on the competition, because every place has their own weird, their own specific laws or whatever. If here in the United States, if you're going to call it, there's not actually in Napa, California. It says if you want to call it Cabernet specifically, only with Cabernet. If you want to call it Cabernet, it has to be 95% Cabernet from Napa. The other 5%
in order
could
to
be
use the Napa AVA.
Calling it Napa Cabernet.
Yeah, very specific Napa Cabernet. Well, and so that's an interesting component, again, to talk about California and their rules and their invention of meritage. And that is the Bordeaux blend, but they wanted to put an American stamp on it.
Exactly.
And so
because we can't call it Bordeaux. Bordeaux is a place name meaning Bordeaux, France. So anything grown outside of there can be called Bordeaux.
And so they can use the collection of Bordeaux grapes,
right,
and grown here in the United States, and you can be a part of the Meritage Club, essentially, as a winemaker.
It really is a club.
And you have to pay to use the name.
Pay annual dues if you want to produce a Meritage and have it called Meritage. Or you can just produce your blend. And in the tasting room, unofficially you could say, that's our Meritage blend. But it doesn't. You can't say that anywhere because that's a copyrighted name.
Yep. Yeah. So that's interesting.
And in order to fall under their copyright, you would have to follow their rules, which are the same as the Bordeaux rules. Yeah. So okay. So anyway, blending is great, but not it's just gets complicated.
Well, right. So like we've done, we used to do these blending kits that we would send to our wine club members that wanted to participate. And it would be 4 bottles of wine, and it'd be straight, unadulterated varietals. So it'd be, 100% Refosco, 100% Tempranillo, 100% Cab, 100% Syrah, for example. And we'd send all the things and tips on how to do this. And it was, when we played around with it, it was much harder to figure out how to create a blend without making it muddied.
Yeah.
Where how much do you add? How much is the base? What's the strongest component? Mm-hmm. What are the others giving to it? Mm-hmm. And to figure that out is a real art. I think that is an incredibly fascinating gift to be able to have, because pretty quickly you can make, oh, this tastes like cheap boxed wine. And then somebody sitting next to you has created like this elevated, amazing, beautiful thing. So there is something to be said to those that create really beautiful blends. Like you.
I don't feel like we know what we're doing quite yet totally either. I don't it's really hard, and I think it does.
Sit down and spend like a full day just trying to figure out the Divino and Diablo, right?
It usually takes us 4 hours for those 2 blends.
That's a lot of drinking.
Yeah, and then we come home for lunch, try to sober up. In the next 2 hours, we'll bang out another 2 or 3 or 4 wines, whole wines, because Divino and Diablo are like, sky's the limit. You can do anything with it. It just takes, all we know is we want one to be kind of medium bodied and one to be kind of full bodied. Try to go in the Bordeaux genre and try to go in the Italian genre, sort of, or whatever, right? But like, other than that, like, and then the next day we'll figure out the other 10 blends that we have of reds to do, literally in one day. Like, we can really get through it. It doesn't take that much, but a sky's the limit blend is really hard to do.
Yeah.
And it's tough.
I can see that. Just being able to say, we're definitely making a Merlot, so there's at least 75%. Now, what is this? Yeah. This vintage, what could it use a little beefing up as?
Exactly.
Does it need a little more fruit? What's the fruitier wine that we've created that could add to that?
Exactly.
Or perfumes, or, not perfumes, but, the aromas of the grape. I'm calling that a perfume, not like essences or something weird.
Right.
Let's move on to the next question.
Okay, yeah.
Are some blends better than others, and why?
Definitely.
Right?
I think sometimes maybe a winemaker misses the mark, or a blend, with the blending experts or whatever, they miss the mark a little bit. Sometimes what they're trying to do is maybe impossible with the wines they have available.
Oh yeah, that's true. It seems to me that sometimes also you find that it's the kitchen sink wine. That, it was like, oh, we had some of this and some of that, and so we just, put it all together. And
that's why we do Divino and Diablo first, is because we want kind of sky's the limit.
Good call.
Minus, like, you've only got 100 gallons of Cabernet to add to this, so period. That might be our only limiting factor, and usually it's something kind of like that. Like, okay, as much as this much of this wine, but other than that, sky's the limit. So yeah, no, I don't know. But if you wait and just have like the end of the, if a winery has like their sweet wine, usually that's the kitchen sink. It's like all the leftovers that didn't make it into any of the other blends, whatever. I've got 10 gallons of that and 30 gallons of that and 100 gallons of that, and it all kind of goes into one pot, and you put a little sweetness on it, and it tastes pretty good. And
Call it a day.
call it a day. But that's not, it's not a high quality blend. Somebody tasting it's going to be like, a discerning somebody's going to taste it and be like, I don't know what's there, but this sugar covers it up anyway,
Right.
or whatever.
Well, and there's also
I don't know.
there's a debate on whether or not blends are better than straight varietals, and there's the people that really geek out on how complete a single varietal 100% wine can be, and it does have its limits. There's just no way that it's going to be as fulfilling, perfect as if you added just a little bit of something else.
All right, in the situation where you've got a winery that does, say, 5 wines or whatever, so they've got a whole bunch of Merlot coming in. I'm using Merlot a lot.
I know, I don't know
where
we are, but
let's see. You've got
Pinot.
Tons of Pinot. You got 20 tons of Pinot. It's going to be 1/5 of your total production for the winery or whatever. But you can ferment that with 5 different yeasts. You can in different ways, different temperatures, and you get 5 pretty unique wines, even though they're all Pinot Noir, even from the same vineyard, and then you blend them all together to make one cohesive awesomeness. Yes, you can do that. We don't have the luxury of that many tanks, that much space. We do when we have a bigger lot, we separate it into 1, 2, or 3 maybe fermentations, and every time that we have 2 fermentations going on, we use 2 different yeasts every time, because the 2 of them together are a more complete wine than if they were all in one making one. Just because it comes out monolithic, and then it has some holes.
Yes.
Whereas something else, right now we've got Sangiovese fermenting it, we had Sangiovese. We actually just pressed it and blended it or whatever. But like the 2 different fermentations tasted a little different. We had one that was a little fruitier, and it's like, oh, maybe this is gonna be too sweet and like fluffy, and then the other one was more austere and had more tannins, and it was like, oh man, it's just rough. I don't know if it's gonna, but together, then you're like, oh yeah, and
that's super cool.
They just spent those times separate. Now they're gonna spend the time together blending, becoming one.
I think that is such a cool, amazing thing, and that's what real winemaking skill and what all the continued education and advanced chemistry and all the deep dives into different types of yeasts and use of oak and all these different things. You wouldn't know to do that.
Right.
You wouldn't just, as a home winemaker getting started, you're not going to be like, let me really research these yeasts. You're going to go to the store and buy the one wine yeast. They simplify everything for you. Yeah. But I love that because that is so interesting to me.
You have your one batch and you ferment it and you press it off and you don't have any other wines to blend with it. And you're like, man, it's pretty good. It's just not what those guys down the street at the actual winery do. And it's because they had something to blend with and some,
and to know all those
having
little
other wines
tricks is very cool.
And that, that's kind of like an insurance policy for us too. Like sometimes one yeast, but we take copious notes too. And it's like, this worked this way, this worked that way, and we take tasting notes on each yeast and each different malolactic bacteria strain, and like all these different things, and over the years we're like, this tends to work with this tends to work with that, but it's never done. I mean, we're always experimenting.
So awesome.
So next year it could suck. I don't know, but it could also be better than ever.
Calculating and excited, and I think that's why you're in the business, right?
Yeah.
Is to be creative and fun and also play chemistry.
Yeah.
All right, we've got one more question.
Okay.
What are some blends to look for And that's a big question. Obviously, Divino and Diavolo. Highly recommend those.
Worldwide, it's the two of the major ones are, of course, Bordeaux, which is Cabernet, Merlot, Carmenere.
Syrah.
Nope.
Oh,
Bordeaux.
yeah. Just kidding.
Cab Franc and Malbec.
Petit Verdot.
Petit Verdot, sorry, not Malbec.
Well,
those are the 5 original reds from Bordeaux, and now they've added 3 more because of climate change. And then there's the Rhone varietals, which we were talking about earlier with the Chateauneuf du Pape. That's also GSM. Grenache Syrah Morved is a huge one that comes out of California and Australia, because GSM goes well together.
Yeah. Champagne is a classic one. A lot of people don't realize. You're looking at Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier in most standard champagnes.
Unless they call it Blanc de Blanc, and then that's just Chardonnay.
Yep.
But Blanc de Noir, actually, if they don't say Blanc de Blanc or Blanc de Noir, usually means Merlot and
it's usually if it just says, say, Brut. It's
exactly.
a blend.
It's always going to be a blend in that situation. What other major ones are there? I mean,
we talked a little bit about Italy. Like those are, some interesting aspects to sort of blending. Rioja tends to be Tempranillo and Grenache.
Those are kind
of the kings of
the standards.
There's just most Chateauneufs are using a combination, but there's still some of the oldest houses. The creme de la creme are still using all 13, and then of course we talked about Meritage, and there's a lot of really excellent blends all across the United States, and pay attention a little bit more to the blending of multiple vineyards, because I think that's always really interesting, because it's the same grape, but it has a little bit more wow factor when they're combining, and that's kind of interesting.
And we're doing a decent amount of that, at least with our Chardonnay and our Syrah and our Riesling. Those are the 3 that we end up using, some north, some south, a lot. Just because we don't have enough from the north. We probably would go more straight if we had it, but we just don't have it like on most vintages. So if it reaches the 75% threshold, we call it the north, but if it doesn't, we leave that off of there and just talk about it.
Well, hopefully you guys learned something new today, and if you have follow-up questions, of course, write in, message us, however you want to get a hold of us. And so what we're looking at coming up for the next couple of weeks, next week is Santa Fe Wine and Chili, and I have a private wine event with Johnny V. Love Johnny V. He's a great chef, local celebrity, and I love getting to work with him. And so we have a very special private event at a big posh house.
Look up his cookbook.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so I'm not going to be around, so you're welcome to, do the show solo with Chris.
Why don't we skip it next week?
Okay, so then I thought that might be the case. And then the following 2 weeks,
you're gone in Italy.
I'm in Italy, and then you're gone hunting after that. So I think we're going to have a short hiatus.
Yeah.
And come back really towards the end of October.
Mid-October, yeah. I'll be back by the 12th or something. I don't know what.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking it was going to be later than that. Yeah, so mid-October. So we're going to skip a couple of weeks, and then, I'll create an event and share it. So keep an eye on that, so that then you can say that you're going to attend, and then you get the updates and the reminders. I've actually had a lot of people asking about that, and one brilliant friend of mine in particular was like, why aren't I getting alerts? And I was like, oh, because I stopped making events. And so I'll go back to that.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Thank you guys so much. Don't forget, every time you buy a bottle of our wine, we plant a tree with Eden Reforestation Projects. And have a fantastic couple of weeks without us. Drink, drink, drink.
Cheers, y'all. Cheers, you, baby.
Cheers, you, baby.
All right.